Hey everyone, we are continuing our Incarnate devotional series, moving ourselves toward Christmas Day, where we celebrate the birth of our Savior. And we, in this series, have been trying to convince you that this has been a monumental thing that the people of God have looked forward to and waited patiently and celebrated even before the arrival of Jesus. And so we've been in the Old Testament for the last several weeks looking at how they were looking forward to arriving at that. So today we are looking at a very popular passage actually found in Jeremiah chapter 31, and we're looking at the verses 31 through 34. And this entire passage is about the new covenant that God says to his people that he's going to make, because the old covenant was broken. And it was not just broken because it didn't work. It was broken because we are broken. And he's saying, I'm going to bring the solution with you. And the arrival of this son being born on Christmas Day is that solution. There's a story that Haddon Robinson tells of a man who was born in Chicago, went on a business trip into Kentucky, saw a young lady that he kind of was smitten for, and wooed her, began courting her, and then convinced her to marry him and move back with him from Kentucky to Chicago. And they had this really great marriage for the first 2 or 3 years of their lives. And then somewhere along in there, she got very ill, and in the midst of this illness, had a very sudden and nasty seizure. And coming out of the pain of the seizure and the pain of the illness, something snapped in her mind and she became insane. And it's told that on her best days she would have a pretty steady dementia that she demonstrated, and on her worst days she would scream at everybody who she was around. She would be violent sometimes with him, and she would scream at neighbors and yell at them, run them off, and things like that. And so this very well-to-do businessman thought, well, okay, what we're going to do then is we're going to kind of move out of the city a little bit. I'm going to build a house for her, and at this house I'm going to stay there and I'm going to nurse her back to health. So he's with his own hands building this new house for her. And in the midst of that, one of his really good friends, who happened to be involved in the medical profession at the time, suggests to him, why don't you take her back to Kentucky, and maybe being around some familiar setting will kind of bring her back into reality. And so this man, being desperate, thinks that I'll do whatever it takes, and takes her to Kentucky, shows her around the old neighborhood, walks her through her old home, even shows her some of her old friends and some of her old neighbors and such. And after several days, the man becomes depressed because nothing is snapping her out of this. And so he gently puts her back in the car and is driving back to Chicago. And on the way to Chicago, he looks over and she's asleep. And we're not talking just taking a nap, but she is in a deep slumber that she hasn't experienced in weeks. So they get home. He gently pulls her out of the car, takes her up to her room, lays her on the bed, and he sits by her bed, and she sleeps and sleeps and sleeps for the night, for the next day, the day after, and for several days she's just asleep. And he's sitting by her the whole time, and one day she wakes up and she's kind of coming out of it, and she looks at him and says, boy, I feel like I've been on just the longest journey. And with the greatest relief, he says, you have been on quite the journey. And she looks at him and says, but you weren't with me. Where have you been? And he says, with the most kindness he possibly can, I have been right here next to you the entire time. When you read this passage in Jeremiah 31, there's going to be a key sentence in there. And it's going to sound like this: I will put my law within them, I will write it on their hearts, and I will be their God, and they will be my people. I'm hoping this Christmas season you will discover that God has been with us even in the midst of our insanity, and of our mess, and of our illness, and of our sickness, and our sin. He's been right there with us the whole time, and that the arrival of Jesus shows us that this covenant that God is making with us is not about our performance, but about God dwelling within our hearts. And so I want you to spend some time today and just thinking about how God has been with you this entire time and how you are going to continue to organize and structure your life for God to be with you. You guys have a blessed day, and we'll be talking to you very soon.